Hi everyone, we are Medinas, and we are an easy way for healthcare organizations to monetize their surplus medical supplies and equipment. In 2015, my late grandmother was diagnosed with terminal brain cancer, and we had to decide whether or not to bankrupt our family to pay for a surgery that might have only slightly prolonged her life. So you can imagine my shock when I learned about the $700 billion worth of waste the US healthcare system generates every year. $700 billion. 91% of the countries on Earth have a national GDP smaller than that number. If we want to solve this problem, we need to start with the billions of dollars in surplus medical supplies and equipment in perfect usable condition that's thrown away every single year. For example, the San Francisco Hospital's neurology department estimates that it generates $3 million a year in waste. If we can help them monetize that for just 50 cents on the dollar, that's an extra $1.5 million in one department in one hospital. Imagine the lives that can save. This is what surplus looks like. Perfectly good equipment and supplies in massive warehouses. This is a result of product upgrades, contract changes, and consolidations. The problem is that there is no easy, frictionless solution for buying and selling surplus. Clinical engineers and supply chain managers at hospitals are busy. All of our competitors add 20 or 30 steps to their existing workflows, and they don't have time to deal with unvetted buyers and brokers. But what if selling surplus could be as easy as clicking a button? Medinas Health makes that possible. Our platform is a fast, easy, and safe way for healthcare organizations to monetize their surplus medical supplies and equipment. We directly integrate with the systems they're already using. So clinical engineers simply push a button, which sends information to our platform. No more buyers and brokers. Medinas Health handles the inspection and the valuation. We handle the buyer matching. We facilitate the sales contract and the transaction. We handle the stakeholder reporting within the hospital, which is finance, accounting, and clinical management. And we also handle the service providers who come in, disassemble the equipment, transport it safely to the end buyer, and reassemble on site. This system means we can reduce our overheads by 33%, and we don't hold inventory because we're operating on a sell-in-place consignment model. We're currently using a 70-30 revenue split, and our strategy is own the supply side of the market so we can optimize our gross margins at scale. We started transacting sales on April 1st, and in short 2.5 weeks, we've generated a $1.1 million GMV pipeline. And the brands you see up there are the ones that are already looking at working with us. It includes 6 hospitals, 1 original equipment manufacturer, 1 private equity firm, and 1 nonprofit. We're a team of healthcare professionals, product specialists, engineers, and healthcare investors. Our VP of Sales has over a decade of experience in clinical asset management and secondary market liquidations. Our co-founder and chief financial officer is a healthcare investment banker, and he was a board observer for a company that sold to Johnson & Johnson for $500 million that had similar call points to what Medinas does. My co-founder and chief product officer, Jesse, worked with me at Teespring as well as with Tim. He helped scale a company to $150 million in revenue, and a company he co-founded in college was acquired by Spotify earlier this year. Our co-founder and CTO, Tim, is a full-stack engineer. He comes from a family of engineers, medical professionals and surgeons, and he's grown up in hospitals and he's seen this problem. And I've personally built a $5 million API company. And the most important thing is we're good friends and we all want to work on this problem together. Earlier this year, we raised a $1 million seed round from Sound Ventures and General Catalyst, and we're looking to raise a seed extension later on so we can scale our product and our scales team. We're a country that spends $3 trillion a year on healthcare, and we throw away a quarter of it. We all want to see a future where our healthcare costs can go down. Help us solve a part of this $700 billion problem. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. So I had a client in this space, and one of the challenges they had was just dealing with the regulatory landscape. And so can you talk a bit about your strategy there?
Yeah, so we simply facilitate the transaction. So
Okay.
we actually don't fall under FDA regulatory issues. And also, the only thing we have to make sure is when we sell a Class 1 or 2 FDA device, that the end user has a medical license. So we're fine.
So when I first heard the concept, I assumed this was about sort of expiring disposable items. But it sounds like you're really talking about high CapEx capital equipment. So, and as you mentioned, one of your team members is currently in that market. And so I imagine there is an industry of brokers whose job it is to do this day in and day out. What does the platform do that those people are not currently doing?
So we're effectively a hybrid of a CMMS system and a marketplace. So effectively, we're actually taking all of those pieces that we talked about here, productizing them. So it's a simple workflow. So the clinical managers can just see status updates when we actually do the liquidation. Right now, we're in a supplier-constrained market, and the problem is an information bottleneck in getting details about the device or the supply out of the hospital system into a vendor's hands. Also, 75% of inventory management in healthcare is done manually. So this is a huge time problem, and the clinical engineers and supply chain managers who handle these liquidations, this isn't their primary job. Right now, they literally throw this stuff away. We talked to NYU, and their clinical engineers will roll a $20,000 portable x-ray machine that's perfectly good off a dock into a compactor. There are kids in Oakland who don't have access to primary care, and there's perfectly good equipment being thrown away.
How exactly do you handle the inspections?
So what we're looking for is actually providing information for the buyer. They want to see that the machine will power up. They want to see the faceplate on the actual device. And they also want us to verify that the supplies, when we're doing disposables, are actually sterile. So it's really just a process of making sure that the equipment is in good order and that all the records are in place.
And whose responsibility is it if it somehow gets to the buyer and it doesn't work well?
So we're doing inspections on both sides of the engine, and we're using third-party service providers who are typically from the original equipment manufacturers who handle the disassembly and reassembly on the other side. So for instance, if we do a Toshiba Canon CT machine, we'll work with their team to actually do the facilitation where we disassemble and reassemble on the other side.
And after all that, there's still enough margin left over for you?
Yeah, actually, when we sell a patient monitor, we get an 88% gross margin. C-arms, we usually see 24 to 25% gross margins. And right now, we chose the 70-30 consignment split because that's the pricing that is the most competitive on the market from our competitors. And when we've gone in and talked to these healthcare systems about saying, hey, we're going to try the exact same pricing model as our competitors, will you switch? They've switched to us. We've generated that pipeline since April 1st.